Hi, folks. Welcome back to American Literature 1. Today we're going to be talking about the American poet and essayist Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. Oliver Wendell Holmes was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1809, attended Harvard, graduated in the class of 1829. While he was there, he read law, but later decided on medicine as a profession. His parents were very proud. He was a thinker and writer. In 1830, he initiated the effective movement to prevent the scrapping of the gallant ship, the USS Constitution, otherwise known as Old Ironsides, by composing his famous poem, Old Ironsides, written impromptu with the competence of the born writer. Now, the U.S. Navy had decommissioned the USS Constitution and was going to use it for target practice for the Navy ships of the day. It had outlived its usefulness. But Holmes's poem stirred up a great sense of patriotism and nostalgia for the ship, and the Secretary of the Navy changed his position, reversed it. Now, after serving as professor of anatomy at Dartmouth for about 2 years, from 1838 to 1840, he returned to the general practice of medicine in Boston after getting married. However, it wasn't to last. The general practice, the marriage did, and he became the Parkman Professor of Anatomy and Physiology at Harvard University. He also began work on a series of papers called The Autocrat, which would later go on to form the basis for his book, The Autocrat of the Breakfast Table. In 1857, Holmes, with other members of a group called the Saturday Club, which included such literary laudables as Holmes himself, John Greenleaf Whittier, William Dean Howells, and our other poet, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, formed the Atlantic Monthly magazine, which is still in print to this day, over 160 some odd years later. It began to, of course, as you can see from the cover here, it was devoted to literature, art, and politics. So, fascinating fellow with quite a life. And now we're going to look at a couple of his poems. The first will be Old Ironside. So here on the screen is a picture of the USS Constitution, otherwise known as Old Ironsides. And listen along as I read the poem, Old Ironsides. I tear her tattered ensign down. Long has it waved on high, and many the eye has danced to see that banner in the sky. Beneath it rung the battle shout and burst the cannon's roar. The meteor of the ocean air still sweep the clouds no more. Her deck once red with heroes' blood, where knelt a vanquished foe, where winds are hurrying o'er the flood, and waves were white below, no more shall feel the victor's tread, or know their conquered knee. The harpies of the shore shall pluck the eagle from the sea. Oh, better that her shattered hulk should sink beneath the wave, her thunders shook the mighty deep, and there should be her grave. Nail to the mast her holy flag, set every threadbare sail, and give her to the god of storms, the lightning and the gale. Okay. Beautiful tribute here. And what really drives this poem is the incredible imagery. For example, in the second stanza here, her deck once red with heroes' blood, where knelt the vanquished foe, where winds were hurrying over the deck while the waves were white below. It almost takes you there. This was a battleship from the times when after the initial engagement with cannons, one crew would board the other and the battle would take place on the decks itself. And the poem almost rings with the history of the Constitution, her battles at sea against the British, or against privateers, against many a foe. And he says, oh, better that her shattered hulk should sink beneath the wave, her thunders shook the mighty deep, and there should be her grave. He says it's fitting that she should sink beneath the earth or beneath the sea rather, than succumb to the rigors of old age and the destruction thereof. And he said, nail to her mast her holy flag, and set her threadbare sail, and give her to the god of storms, the lightning and the gale. Let her be free. Turn her loose, as if, let her battle, let her resting place be in the ocean. Give her one last glorious run before, rather than have her taken apart for scrap or whatever. He says, in essence, He's saying, it's fitting that she would go this way, that this would be the end, the final fate of the USS Constitution, Old Ironsides, rather than decay. And you can see perhaps how this created public outcry and how it stirred people to action. Poetry can make a difference. It certainly did in this case. The funny thing is, we remember him most for his poetry now, but at the time he was a very popular after-dinner speaker, and he was mostly known for his essays. Okay, so we're going to take a look at another poem real quick. This is called The Chambered Nautilus. Okay, nautilus, by the way, is from the Greek word for sailor. If you remember, if you're familiar with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Captain Nemo, his ship was called the Nautilus. It was a submarine. Essentially, if you're familiar with steampunk, it was one of the original steampunk stories. All right. So, on with The Chambered Nautilus by Oliver Wendell Holmes. The Chambered Nautilus. This is the ship of pearl, which poets feign, sails unshadowed main. The venturous bark that flings on the sweet summer wind its purpled wings, in gulfs enchanted where the siren sings, and the coral reefs lie bare, where the cold sea maids raise to sun their shining hair. In webs of living gauze there are no more to unfurl, wreck the ship of pearl, and every chambered cell, where its den deeming life won't want to dwell, as to the frail shape of its growing shell. And before here lies revealed its irised ceiling rent, its sunless crypt unsealed. Year after year beheld the silent toil, the spreads of lustrous coil. Still as the spiral grew, he let the past year's dwelling for the new. Stole with the step of the shining archway through, built up its idle door. Stretched in his last found home, he knew the old no more. Thanks for the heavenly message brought by thee, child of the wandering sea. Cast from her lap forlorn, from the dead lips of a clearer note is born, that ever Triton blew from wreathed horn. While on mine ear it rings, through the deep caves of thought, I hear a voice that sings. Build these stately mansions, O my soul, as swift seasons roll. Leave thy low vaulted past. Let each new temple, nobler than the last, shut from heaven with its dome more vast. Thou at length art free, leaving thine outgrown shell by life's unresting sea. Okay. So what is he saying here? What is this all about? Well, this is a poem about change and about personal growth. Right? And if you take a look at the Nautilus shell, and let me navigate back to it real quick. Each one of these little chambers here, you see that it's that each one is walled off. This is a bisected shell, and you can see each one of these places here is sealed off from the one before, and as each one of these chambers represents a stage of growth. Right? And as the Nautilus gets bigger, older, what it does is it builds a wall between itself and what was, and the shell grows, and so forth, and so on, and so on. Now, we learn from stanza 2 here that the Nautilus has passed away. The Nautilus in question is dead and gone. He has just seen the shell on the side of the seashore and is inspired by it. It's dead. The tentacles no longer work. Okay, and excuse me. With every year, a mollusk moves to a new chamber and shell. It grows. And that's what he's talking about here. He says, this is a metaphor for life. The overarching metaphor is that the Nautilus shell is like a lesson in life. He says, thanks to the Nautilus for teaching him about life. He says, from thy dead lips a clearer note is born than ever Triton blew from his wreathed horn. Okay, and There's an editor's note here at the bottom. The world is too or hear the Triton blow from a wreathed horn. Yeah. And the overarching message here: leave the past behind and move on to the new. All this is inspired by his walk by the seaside and finds this shell. So it's a message for us. And he says, this is, in nature here we found a lesson in life. We see that nature tells that the nautilus has a lot to tell us about living, that we move on, that that we can't go back to the past is gone, and that we should never surge forward. All right, so it's two there from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and our next video will be discussing Mr. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Hope you're reading along, and I'll see you in the next video.